Let's talk about the 10 best cards in Rise of Shadows.
Hey buddy, watch this.
To rank the cards in this list, I used some data from HS Replay regarding their played rates in the current meta. So I'm talking about the post-buff or nerf meta here. So there's some nerfed cards on this list. And although I use some objectivity with the data, I'm still subjectively ranking these from 10th to 1st. So you might disagree a little here and there, but that said, this is just my take. At the number 10 spot here, I have Ursa Tron for Hunter, and you might be thinking, oh my god, Ursa Tron's a really, really good card. How did this only make it into the 10th spot? Well, frankly, there's like 40 good cards in Rise of Shadows. There's so many good cards that aren't going to be on this list, and Ursa Tron, despite being one of the most played cards in the set, still only made it to number 10 because there's just a lot of great choices. Clearly, Ursa Tron has been a prominent part of Mech Hunter, which has been one of the most defining lists in the expansion so far. It's a really, really prominent archetype in both Wild and Standard. But that said, despite Ursa Tron being one of the most popular decks, I don't really know if it's like the defining card. It certainly helps do everything they want to do. It's a mech with a little card draw, it refills the hand, has Death Rattle synergies. So all kinds of good stuff going on here. Obviously a fantastic card. The only reason I didn't put it higher is because I don't think the deck demands Ursa Tron necessarily so much as just really, really likes it. Moving on to the number 9 spot, I have Sludge Slurper, another fantastic card, this time in Shaman. And the reason I gave a card like this the bump over Ursa Tron is because it's currently showing up in a couple different ways to play Shaman. Of course, Murloc Shaman loves Sludge Slurper because it's a fast, aggressive Murloc and cheap to combo with things like Underbelly Angler. But beyond that, it's also being played in some Overload lists because it's a really cheap Overload activator for things like your Thunderhead. And Lackeys are just really strong cards. So all of that combined means this is one of the most flexible cards I think we've ever seen in Hearthstone. It can do so much for costing so little. Up next here is Archivist Luciana, a card that actually had to get nerfed. She was so good, and despite that, still being played a lot in Control Warrior list. It's pretty prominent right now on the Standard format ladder. And that's because Luciana is just the ultimate anti-fatigue tool. Any deck that's planning to play into a fatigue state can use this to prevent that, and a lot of greedy control decks are going to do exactly that, and they're held hostage a little bit with a card like this because if everybody else is running it, you kind of have to as well for those control versus control matchups. So of course, since she serves such a distinct purpose and is very, very good at fixing a problem, Luciana is going to be a great card. Moving on to the Underbelly Angler, another Murloc for Shaman. And you might think, wait a minute, Regis, why are you putting Angler above Sludge Slurper if they're played in the same deck? And Sludge Slurper's played in multiple decks, and that's a fine question to ask and a great thing to discuss in the comments below. I'm sure you'll criticize me at least a little here and there, but I have some logic, and that's that I think Underbelly Angler is just so good at what it does that it has completely enabled the archetype of Murloc Shaman. Like, it is the centerpiece for the deck because it is such a value engine. You can reload to a ridiculous degree with this card, enabling you to play Murloc Shaman as far less of a just hyper aggro all-in deck and more of this kind of mid-rangey deck where you have things like Hagatha, the hero card, comboing nicely with minions. You even play some Shutterwalks, and the deck shifts itself from a low curve deck to a mid-range curve deck because of this card. And I just don't think Murloc Shaman would exist without it. And since it has single-handedly propped up this high-tier archetype, Underbelly Angler takes a higher spot for me. Up next is the Evil Cable Rat, a card I never would have expected to see on a list like this. But when it comes to flexibility, Evil Cable Rat nails it, much like Sludge Slurper. Just a nice, easy minion to play for a lot of decks to generate some lackey value. And lackeys are just really, really good. Will they always be? I don't know. We're going to have more lackeys added to the lackey pool apparently throughout the course of this year. They might get weaker, but for now, doesn't matter. Evil Cable Rat played in a variety of different decks. This is one of the most played cards in Rise of Shadows, even though it doesn't look like anything special. It's just everybody has a reason to use a card like this when we're in a standard format rotation. So sure enough, Evil Cable Rat somehow magically making it pretty high on this list. So now let's talk about Khadgar. Probably no surprise here. Conjurer's Calling Mage has been a huge success on the Hearthstone ladder right now. It's the defining way to play mage, and it really has kind of shaped the meta around it in a lot of ways, particularly in like the tournament scene, but also on the normal ladder as well. And Khadgar is a big part of that because he enables you to create some really bonkers turns with Conjurer's Calling, where you can summon lots and lots of extra giant dudes, both extra instances of them, but they're also extra big. So Khadgar goes a long way towards empowering that game plan. He's also just got some other synergies that really haven't been explored all that much yet, just summoning, multiple things off mirror images and your Giggling Inventors. Those have certainly been done. But the main way this card is played right now is Conjurer's Calling, but I think there's even future potential for Khadgar too with other Death Rattles and summoning style cards. So I don't think this is necessarily a one-trick pony card. It's one that has a lot of potential in the future, but is also just darn good right now. Next up here, I have Archmage Vargoth, neutral legendary card that is being played, again, in a lot of different decks. Turns out, spells are good, and having twice as many spells on a given turn is even better, and that makes Vargoth a fantastic fit for all kinds of decks and classes, and I don't think that's going to change. I think this card just looks universally good, reasonable stat line for its body, sticks around occasionally, doubles your value on stuff, and a lot of classes have spells that are always good with Vargoth. Twin Spell in particular has some pretty nifty synergies with Vargoth, so no surprise at all for me to see this card taking such a prominent spot in the meta. I don't suspect that will change anytime soon, so pretty clearly one of the most flexible cards as a neutral card in the set, and also just one of the strongest. And now we have my top three, starting off with Omega Devastator. Anybody who's played Hearthstone in the last couple of months knows this card feels ridiculously strong. Dealing 10 damage for a 4-mana minion creates giant swing opportunities. They kill something enormous, and they play a 4/5 in the process, which leaves them plenty of mana to do things like attach a Ziliax, and then, rush that as a 7/7 into something else and heal for a ton and clear your entire board and stabilize the game. This has happened to me countless times, and I get frustrated every single one. It's always Ziliax. But clearly, Bomb slash Mech slash Control Warrior has utilized this card to great degrees of success. It feels like the most oppressive card in the deck. They even generate them sometimes from Omega Assembly or the Dr. Boom Hero Power Delivery Drone, which means you'll have to face down even more than 2 of these on occasion, which across the board makes this one of the most frustrating cards in Rise of Shadows, I think, which sort of reinforces the idea that it's really one of the most powerful as well. Now at the number 2 spot, I have Evil Miscreant for Rogue, the ultimate lackey generator here. This is the second most played card in the expansion, even today, after it's been nerfed and after Tempo Rogue certainly took a huge hit. Rogue is still popular enough, and Miscreant is so pervasive in that class that it's still, even today, ranking as one of the most popular cards in Hearthstone. And that's just because it's so good. The body on this is fine for a 3-drop. It's not exciting, but it's enough to stick around. It hangs around, it does some work, and then the lackeys are just fantastic, particularly when you can create extra copies of them. You have Battlecry or combo synergies for a card like Evil Miscreant. That means your lackeys and your Miscreant are both getting extra bonuses, so Spirit of the Shark enables some pretty crazy stuff right now with the Evil Miscreant, but even outside of Spirit of the Shark, this card's just really, really good on its own. Creating 3 things out of 1 card, sometimes even more if your lackeys generate more things, means it goes a long way. You can stretch the value out of this 3-drop pretty far, and for a class like Rogue, who really values low-cost cards being added to their hand for various reasons, like combo activations, but also Edwin Van Cleef, Evil Miscreant is pretty much the perfect card for the class, and that's why it's so darn popular. And then finally here at the number 1 spot, I have Conjurer's Calling. A lot of good cards on this list. Debatable which one you'd put at the top, but for me, I think Conjurer's Calling has had the most influence in the Hearthstone meta because it has totally just generated a new way to play Mage, both at the beginning of the expansion as we were figuring this out, but even now with the Luna's Pocket Galaxy stuff, all the Mage lists currently run Conjurer's Calling. It powers Khadgar up rather nicely, but on its own, it's still just ridiculous. Getting multiple enormous minions on board by playing a cheap Mountain Giant or Sea Giant and then Conjurer's Calling it is one of the silliest plays we've ever seen in Hearthstone. You can get Mountain Giants out super early in the game and overwhelm your opponent before they ever have a chance. And because of the twin spell aspect of Conjurer's Calling, you get to do that 4 times, creating multiple boards that your opponent just can't resolve and leaving you in a position where you win the game. Now, I don't really know if I think Conjurer's Calling is healthy for Hearthstone. Like, it's a super fun card to play, but it's pretty hard to play around in some cases, and it creates unwinnable situations, which can be pretty frustrating. I don't mind it as much as Omega Devastator for some reason, but nonetheless, an intimidating card, a frightening one in a lot of ways, one we're going to have to keep our eyes on moving forward because it has completely reshaped how we play Hearthstone today and what the meta looks like. So that's why, to me, it's probably the strongest and the best card in Rise of Shadows. And there you go, folks. That's my list. Those are my rankings. I'm curious what you guys think. What card did I leave off this list that you think should have been included? There were a lot of good options. I don't even think I'll disagree with you, but like, sure, that's an awesome card. It could have been on the list. Yeah, absolutely. It was hard to narrow down to 10, even harder to set the positions on this list. So I want to hear your rankings. Just go ahead and list all your top 10 in the comments below. Now, that said, I want to thank you for watching, and I just want to say until next time, game on.